Hey everyone, it's triplemangothreat. Today we're talking about a Persistent Petitioners deck, which means we can have any number of them. This deck is going to be all about milling us and our opponents. We have several ways to untap our Persistent Petitioners, bring them back from the graveyard to the battlefield, and draw a huge amount of cards. Let's jump right into it. Our commander is Damia, Sage of Stone for 4 green, blue, black. It's a 4/4 Gorgon Wizard with Death Touch. Damia says, skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. And we're still drawing a card from our draw step, so we're going to have 8 cards each turn. This is an amazing commander. In this deck, we're going to have 28 Persistent Petitioners. For 1 and a blue, we have a 1/3 Human Advisor. We can pay 1, tap it. Target player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, which isn't very good. But we can tap 4 untapped advisors we control. Target player puts the top 12 cards of their library into their graveyard. A deck can have any number of cards named Persistent Petitioners. What's really important is that it says tap 4 untapped advisors you control. This means our Persistent Petitioners do not need haste. They would need haste if it had that tap symbol in the first part of the card. When it just says the word tap, this means our creatures do not need haste. So the turn they come out, we can start tapping 4 untapped advisors and we're milling our opponents by 12, or we're milling ourselves by 12. We also have a lot of ways to untap our Persistent Petitioners with Dramatic Reversal, which we can untap all non-land permanents we control just for 1 and a blue, and it's an instant, so we can do it at the end of someone's turn, right before ours. We have Intellectual Offering for 4 and a blue. Choose an opponent. You and that player each draw 3 cards. Choose an opponent. Untap all non-land permanents you control and all non-land permanents that player controls. We're most likely going to get the benefit out of this rather than them because we're going to start milling a lot. Mercfiend Liege for 2 and 3 hybrid of Simic. It's a 4/4 horror. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. Other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. This doesn't matter, but what's really important, it says untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So that means the Persistent Petitioners are going to be untapped at each player's untap step, so we're going to be milling a lot. Quest for Renewal for 1 and a green. Whenever a creature you control becomes tapped, you can put a quest counter on Quest for Renewal. As long as there are 4 or more quest counters on Quest for Renewal, untap all creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So again, another Mercfiend Liege. It's super powerful because we're going to be milling at least 12 if we have those 4 Persistent Petitioners each untap step. So if we do this each turn and we only have 4 Persistent Petitioners, that's 12 times 4, that's 48 cards we're milling. So going around the table twice, we're going to be milling someone's whole library. Vitalize for 1 and a green, it's an instant. Untap all creatures you control. These cards are going to be really powerful when we have a lot of Persistent Petitioners. More cards that are going to help us mill are cards like Altar of the Brood for 1. It's an artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard, or simply, when a permanent enters our battlefield, each opponent's going to mill 1. So that means when a land enters the battlefield, or even one of our Persistent Petitioners, which is really nice. Consuming Aberration for 3, blue, black. Its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards, and that's going to be a lot because we're milling them a lot. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a land card, then puts those cards into their graveyard. So this is going to be feeding into what Consuming Aberration already wants to do. It's counting the number of cards in each opponent's graveyards, and when they cast a spell, they're going to be milling even more. Memory Erosion for 1 blue blue, it's an enchantment. Whenever our opponents are going to cast a spell, they're actually going to be milling 2 cards. Mindcrank for 2 colorless. If our opponents lose life, whether that's from us hitting them or they just lose life from drawing cards like Phyrexian Arena, they're actually going to be milling by losing life. Psychic Corrosion for 2 and a blue. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Well, this is going to happen a lot because remember our commander Damia? We're drawing cards equal to the difference. That means if we have 0 cards, we're going to be drawing 7, and then they're going to be milling 14. Moving on to the value part of the deck, we have Bloodbond March for 2 black and green. It's an enchantment. Whenever a creature spell is played, each player returns all cards with the same name as that spell from his or her graveyard to play. So when we play a Persistent Petitioner, or when we cast it, if we have milled ourselves and we have all the other Persistent Petitioners in our graveyard, they're coming to play directly, and that means we can start milling a lot. Bottled Cloister for 4 colorless. It's an artifact. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, remove your hand from the game face down. At the beginning beginning of your upkeep, return all cards removed from the game with Bottled Cloister to your hand, then draw a card. So since it says at the beginning of your upkeep, and Damia also says at the beginning of your upkeep, we're able to stack what happens first. So for example, we want Damia to trigger first. So if we have 0 cards in our hand, we're going to draw the difference, which is 7. And now we're going to have Bottled Cloister happen. We're going to get those cards that were removed from the game back to our hand and then draw a card. So we're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Kefnet's Monument for 3 colorless. It's a legendary artifact. Blue creatures you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a creature spell, target creature an opponent controls doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, which doesn't really matter, but we're making our Persistent Petitioners 1 less, so we're paying 1 blue for these awesome creatures. Last, I want to talk about the finisher cards. Double Enchant for 5 and a green. It's a sorcery. For each creature you control, you may search your library for a creature card with the same name as that creature. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So we're grabbing all of our Persistent Petitioners with this one. Living Death for 3 black. It's a sorcery. We're pretty much doing a switcheroo. All the creatures on the battlefield are going in the graveyard. All the creatures in the graveyard are going to the battlefield, and this applies to each player. So if we have all of our Persistent Petitioners in our graveyard, they're coming to the battlefield directly. Secret Salvage for 3 black. It's a sorcery. Exile target non-land card from your graveyard. Search your library for any number of cards with the same name as that card. Reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. What's really important is that we're getting them from our library to our hand. It's okay if we discard them because we have ways to bring them back. Twilight's Call for 4 black. It's a sorcery. You may cast Twilight's Call anytime you can cast an instant if you pay 2 more to cast it. Each player returns all creature cards from his or her graveyard to the battlefield. Now, hopefully we're going to be getting more value out of this than our opponents because we can start milling them a lot if we have all of our Persistent Petitioners in our graveyard. So I would only really play this if we're going to get the best benefit out of it, so check your opponent's graveyard before you cast this spell. Thank you guys so much for watching. I want to give credit to the original maker of this deck, which is cococows from Archidekt. This was an amazing deck, and especially for the price, it's about $140. If you would like to purchase this deck, I'll leave a link in the description below. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button, comment below what you think of this deck, and subscribe for more Mango content. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.